Welcome to the Ocean Tribe Hangout, where we chat with water humans from across the world. We focus on passion, representation, and most importantly, inspiring the world to venture into the most beautiful place, the ocean. Let's tuck in.
Surprise! Today, unfortunately, Zandi could not join us, but I will be hosting in her place. So, hello, Zandi, we miss you, and hopefully this is the first of many cool guest lives.
Hello.
Hi, Rose. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good, thanks. Nice to meet you. I've never met you. I've seen your name pop up here and there, and today was the first time I'm like, Rose Santana, is it Psy.co? Is that your
Psych,
username?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Psych.
And I'm like, this username is familiar, but I've never actually, wow. And what an inspiration, what an amazing human being, you know, the advert for today's live was just like, what and more and more and more.
I try a little bit.
Yeah. Before we get started, just a few gremlins, there we go. Can you tell us where you are at the moment?
At the moment, I'm in Miami, Florida. I just recently graduated from Florida International University
Cool.
with my bachelor's. Second.
Congratulations.
Bachelor's. Thank you. What a time to graduate, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, how are things for you right now in Miami? It's I visited there once, like 5 years ago. It was a lot of fun. Had some friends there as well. But how have you guys been dealing? Are you still pretty much under lockdown? Have things gone back to normal? What's going on?
They kind of have gone back to normal. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not because of the fact that we literally have just gotten like an influx of cases in the last 2 weeks. They've been like steadily rising, and then I think last Friday everything like opened back up again. So like I'm not sure about this, but
yeah. All right. And are you from Miami or are you from somewhere else? I know a lot of people don't like that question, including my husband, but we want to hear, we're here to hear about you.
No, I think it's more of a like almost there's very few like actual Miami natives, I think. Like we're all from somewhere else. I'm from Dominican Republic. I moved here 5 years ago. So I've been here for 5 years now. Yeah.
And did you move here to study? Did you move there to study or for other reasons?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both. I mean, I always wanted to study marine science. So I kind of knew like I needed to go somewhere that was a little bit more marine science oriented. And then my mother moved back here, so I came with her.
I see.
Yeah.
And tell us a bit about your relationship with the ocean. Did you grow up around the ocean? When did you find the ocean, or her, as Zandi would ask? When did you find her?
I feel like it's sort of this weird thing where I was sort of born to be an ocean child. I was born in Dominican Republic in a town that's right next to the water. I grew up in Germany in a town that's on the water, where like the fishing industry was a very huge thing. And funnily enough, my parents met in Dominican Republic working at a hotel at a dive shop. And my mother was sort of the one responsible for renting out the equipment, and my father would like take people out on tours. So I kind of feel like I was always destined to be an ocean child. It's like
you had no choice.
Yeah,
you had no
the
choice.
ocean was just always there. She calls me, so.
There we go. That's amazing. That's such a beautiful story of both of how your parents met and of like it's like your origin story almost. That's super cool.
It's like I was basically born in the ocean, so.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's so cool. So you mentioned that you knew you wanted to study marine science like for a long time, right? Was this like from the time you were a kid?
I think I was like 8 years old when I told my mom, hey, I'm going to be a marine biologist. And she's like, that's nice, dear. Like thinking it was something that I would grow out of later. And by the time I was 18, I was like, no, I'm still going to study marine science. And I'm 26 now. So like, it's been a long time coming. It's sort of been a thing that's always been there. It was kind of
Hmm.
a thing. When I was a kid, my grandfather used to take me out, fishing with him, and I would be like obsessed during low tide. I would like go out and try to like collect jellyfish that
Yes.
kind of like were stuck in pods. And unfortunately for me, I found out that I can't keep them in my sink at home. But that was kind of
No,
like my
you can't.
first brush with with marine science. And after that, I was like, yeah, no, I'm gonna study this.
Oh, that's amazing. I can relate to some of that, like wanting to study it from a young age and parents kind of thinking you're going to grow out of it. And you
Yeah.
you persevered. So that's so cool. I mean, I feel like as you grow older, and you sort of have a better idea of what it actually entails, that's what puts a lot of people off. But somehow you followed through, you learned more about it, and you were like, yep, this is definitely for me. Oops, are you there? Are you there? Yes.
One of one of us left.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, I think it's one of those things you grow up hearing it a lot, like that it's a super competitive field to get into. And I feel like that dissuades a lot of people because people like think you have to be some sort of like mega genius to make it. Like,
Hmm.
it's like such a diverse field. I feel like when people think of marine biology, they only think of like the shark researchers or they only think of like the people who
Yes,
study dolphins or whales. So it's like,
absolutely. Yes.
is it competitive? Yeah, but if you have like a lot of passion for it, I think it's a little
Hmm.
not easier, but it makes the fight like less problematic, I think. It makes it less of a hassle because you look forward to it.
100%. And I mean, as you go along, you find your own niche. And some people, yes, they're like, yeah, sharks are my thing. But for other people, it's like nothing wrong with shark researchers, says Sharky Jenny.
You know?
Absolutely not. But
We love the sharks. They're just not the
we
only
do.
thing.
Yeah, 100%. And like for me, I enjoy my sharks diving. When it comes to the biology side of things, little things are more fascinating to me. And I'm sure that's, sort of, you can relate to that in a bit, in a way, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love going diving with sharks. Like, I love seeing sharks when I go diving. Is it something that I necessarily
Yes.
want to completely study? I don't know. I'm a
Yeah.
very sort of go with the flow type of person. If an interesting opportunity presents itself, sure, why not? But I'm not the type of person that's like, if I can't study sharks, I don't want to be a marine biologist. Like,
Yes.
no, I
Yeah.
feel like all ocean critters need love. I feel like if you love
Yeah,
one aspect of the ocean, you have to love it as a whole. Like from the whales down
definitely.
to the plankton.
Yes, 100%. I agree with you. So why don't you? So Sharky Jenny says shark research itself is so varied, though. So
Yeah.
scale that to marine biology and as a whole, and that just gives you like an idea of how diverse the field is, and that's so true.
I mean, before I even got into it, at some point I started learning there's chemical oceanography, biological, physical, geochemical.
Yeah,
And like, my mind was blown because it's like basically every field exists within marine biology. Like
true.
every sort of STEM exists with it. So, like, really, the ocean's the limit, right?
I love that. I love that. The ocean is the limit. Um, so tell us what you work on very briefly, because yeah,
So
talking a
I'm
lot
an
about
aquatic
work.
toxicologist primarily. I study metal contaminants in fish,
Oh, yeah.
and I focus a lot on fish behavior. So
Mm-hmm.
predator-prey interactions. Like I live in Florida, and we have a big agricultural industry. So I study metals
Oh,
because they're often found in pesticides and fertilizers and fungicides.
mm,
Every side you need, basically,
yeah.
to grow crops, there's usually like copper in it and
Okay.
phosphorus. So I sort of focus on those metals and how they affect the animals. And I kind of study
Interesting.
sublethal concentrations. So I work with the concentrations that are mandated by the EPA that are supposed to be okay to be in the environment. Because
Yeah,
I was kind of trying to find something where I'm like, all right, this is what's allowed. Is this
but
really the safe amount? you know,
mm,
that's kind of what
yes.
I focus on. And then I dabble in everything else on the side.
That's extremely interesting. Yeah. I saw on the ad that you spoke about like trophic webs, and you had like from sort of plankton to whales, which is really cool for me. Like I love trophic webs, and if you were to explain to, I don't know, say your gran what a trophic web is, what would you say? What would you tell her?
That's so difficult, because it's basically like everything from 0 to 100, and it's just kind of looking at each organism and which food web it sort of falls into, whether it's
Right,
like a
yeah.
primary producer or a primary consumer. It sort of works its way up the food web, and that's why sort of, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I love what I do because I can sort of look at the way these chemicals travel up the food web. So, little plankton are eating stuff that's contaminated with copper. Then a smaller fish
Hmm.
comes along and eats the plankton. And then, a bigger fish eats that smaller fish. And then it sort of works its
Right.
way up step by step from like a tiny plankton all the way up to whales or sharks
Yeah.
even, like the higher up the food chain you go, like the higher the contamination because of biomagnification. So,
Mm.
it's really funny when you actually look at, even sharks, they have like these high concentrations of copper and mercury because of the fact that it works its way up the food chain.
Right. So what the government might say is a safe level of a side, as we speak of them now, um, might be safe for the fish that we eat, but when you consider that a shark eats so many of those fish, it might not be safe on that level. It might not be safe higher up the food chain, right?
Exactly. A lot of the times, especially, I work with sailfin mollies, so they're really small fish. They're maybe like this big. They're very popular in the
Yeah.
aquarium industry because they have like these
Yes.
nice,
Yeah.
big, colorful fins. And it's one of these things, these sailfin mollies are sort of on the lower level of the food chain, but then here in Florida, we have a lot of snapper, red snapper, lane
Okay.
snapper, yellowtail snapper. Sailfin mollies are a primary source of food for these guys because they both inhabit mangrove ecosystems. So now you're looking, at these tiny
Right.
sailfin mollies that are
Yeah.
getting eaten, that are super contaminated with copper, but those are the
Yeah.
same fish that we're fishing out of the bays and, selling and eating.
Yeah.
So it's like, and for me, copper has always been interesting because there haven't been that many studies done on copper in relative to human health. So
Yes.
it sort of
Okay.
turns into this thing, where copper is a neurodegenerative toxicant. So it can cause neurodegenerative
Okay.
issues. There's too much long-term exposure, and it can cause, eyesight issues. It's been known to cause glaucoma. One study showed it. So it's like there's not a lot of research done on it, but we're pumping it out into our ecosystems on a daily basis by the tons. And we don't really know
Mm.
what that's going to do for human health in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. Or even what it has been doing. I mean, how many or what effects that we suffer from today are actually attributed to
Oh yeah.
long-term copper exposure, right?
Yeah. And there's like, since it's not something that people like test for that much because it's not like normal, like when you think of metal
Mm.
contaminants in humans, you usually think of like arsenic poisoning, or you think of
Yeah,
mercury or methyl mercury, No
yeah,
one's ever like, well, what about copper? What about any of the other metals that are kind of there and are kind of problematic, and we all kind of just tend
yeah.
to ignore it because it's not as fancy.
Mm. 100%. That's really interesting. And I mean, gosh, I can't wait to see what you come up with.
Me
And
neither.
so that's talking about it from a work point of view. So now to put aside the shop talk, so to speak. Um, tell me about what does the ocean mean to you aside from a work perspective? I mean, do you what else do you use it for? What else does it give to you? What else do you give to it?
I mean, it's so complicated and so broad because I feel like in a way my entire life is tied to the ocean.
Hmm.
I work studying it, and then in my free time, like we've been out on the water diving for like the past 4 weekends, I think. And, it's something that's really important to me just to be out. I feel like once you're out there, it's like there are no problems. Everything kind of just fades into the background. And it's
Yeah.
really sad to see how we've mistreated our oceans. If you look at pictures that divers took, from 10 years ago, especially here in Miami, our
Yeah.
coral reefs are dying. Like, not too long ago, we
Yeah.
went out on a coral bleach workshop with our dive shop, and we learned how to identify different corals and how to identify diseases and bleaching. And like 80% of the corals where we went were dead. And you kind of just sit there and wonder, like, what does this look like when it's alive? And just the other weekend, we went to a reef that had a few issues, but it was mostly very vibrant. And you kind of sit there and you look at this and you're like, we did this. We are directly responsible for this. And it's so sad. Because it's like, we're at the point, you know, I don't know how many of you guys have heard this, but Biscayne Bay here in Miami actually recently had like a giant fish kill. Because we've killed so much of our seagrass here, like 80% of our seagrass is gone. So it sort of turned into this thing where they said, you know, we're basically at the tipping point and we are almost at the precipice where we cannot undo what we've done. And that's like such an important thing to keep in mind. And that's something I sort of take with me on a daily basis. It's like, you know, we are all somehow dependent on the ocean. Even if you don't live near it, you know, even if you live like in the middle of land, you are somehow dependent on the ocean. You know, people ask me all the time, like, well, you know, I live in the middle of land. Like, what do I care? And I was like, well, do you like breathing? Because the ocean produces a lot of the air that you breathe. Do you like food? Do you like transportation? Do you like ordering stuff from halfway around the world? The ocean helps with that. So why should you not care?
And it makes you wonder if, you know, so as scientists, we feel like we need to communicate, you know, that we need to save the ocean. And I also almost wonder if a part of what we should be teaching is how the ocean, we depend on the ocean for ordinary, everyday things and activities, you know, and services. Because I don't feel like people make that connection, and it's not necessarily their fault when you consider the fact that people are so far removed from that environment. You know, they don't form those links. They just know that certain things come from a supermarket shelf, or certain services have always existed, or, you know, an app gives you access to whatever. So like, shouldn't part of our communication be, this is how you know, the ocean gives us this very essential, very normal, everyday, boring service, right?
I definitely feel like there's sort of a disconnect, and not just with, you know, the ocean, with science in general. And, you know, I don't like calling it the general public. It feels like there's a disconnect, you know, like not everyday
thing. Yeah.
Like, you know, I feel like there's sort of disconnect between them, but when you bring it back and you sort of tell them, you know, why it's important to them and why it would affect them, I feel like it makes it a lot more personal with people. You know, we used to do this thing where, you know, when people ask me, well, you know, we did the science communication workshop, and the person who taught it was great, and he was like, well, why should I care? You know, whenever I said something about my research, and I was like, well, you know, do you like sushi? Do you go eat sushi? Do you want your sushi to be contaminated? You know, once you bring it back to people's like individual lives and not just the grand scheme of things, I feel like you can get a lot of people to care. And the 100%. More people care, the more we get done.
There was a really interesting campaign by, I think it's a South African organization, and it's called, gosh, I forget what it's called, but it's like, we don't need the oceans, you know, like, and they've made this video clip on what would happen if the oceans were dead and gone and, you know, dried up. And it's really moving. I should actually share it with you afterwards, and maybe Zandi can also share it afterwards. But yeah, that was an interesting campaign, because that's like, you know, okay, this is what will actually happen, you know, and that is one way to do it for sure. And I also feel like, you know, there's another aspect to it, and that is connecting people to the ocean. So, you know, you can try connecting people to the thing that they know, be it sushi, be it transport, whatever, or you can actually take people to the ocean, you know, and kind of be like, well, this is it, you know, this is that abstract thing in your mind, you know, that you kind of hear is suffering, but we don't really know much about.
And I definitely feel like a lot of people kind of are disconnected if they're not necessarily like beach goers, or they're not divers, or, you know, paddle boarders, or you know, any sort of water sport. I feel like there's a very big disconnect between the people that are constantly face to face with the ocean and the people that just don't, not that they don't care, they just don't think about it, you know? You know, it's something as simple,
mm.
even, like a forest. If you want to just talk about environment, some people are just not very connected with nature and the environment. And I think that's where a very big disconnect comes from. I mean, just the other day, we had this meeting and we decided to go to the beach and we just sat right next to the ocean while we had our meeting. And it's just like, it's a different feeling
Wow.
than being inside, I think.
Yeah,
It was like something that had nothing to do with it. We're like, let's just go do this meeting by the ocean.
at the beach. Yeah, that's
Why
amazing.
not?
Wow. And so you mentioned diving, scuba diving specifically. What other ways do you like connect with the ocean? Are you a swimmer, a surfer, a free diver, spearfisher?
No, well, I used to sail a lot. I haven't been sailing much these days,
Ooh,
but I
okay.
used to go sailing a lot back when I was younger. So it was that was actually my first taste of it. Before I even became a diver, I was out sailing
Yeah.
like, every chance I could.
Oh,
I had a
wow.
small, like, 3-person catamaran and would just go out by myself. Sometimes I'd take a brave soul with me. But that was sort of my very first, like, me on the water
And
type of experience.
and who taught you to sail?
My father.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's special. That's so special. The family introduction to the ocean, and yeah, that's
Oh yeah.
amazing.
I was like, anything moving forward, it's like everybody's going back to the ocean. There needs to be some sort of connection there. I think
Definitely.
taking nature in general just very much so for granted. It's a very big thing that you
Mm.
see, even with the amount of pollution. There's just trash everywhere, you know, and it's sort of something
Mm.
that I'm very big on, like community and citizen science projects, because I feel like
Hmm.
it's a way to introduce the everyday person, to science without it seeming so scary. I think that's a big thing. A lot of people
Yeah.
see science and it's just like a bunch of jargon and big words, and they're like, well, I don't know what that means. So, so I feel like making it relatable to
Yeah.
the everyday person sort of helps.
Mm.
I mean, there was just recently a video down here where this manatee was swimming through the bay and there was just like trash everywhere, and the poor manatee couldn't find its way because there was just so much trash floating. And, it's one of those things where even if everybody just takes like maybe once or twice a month and you just go clean something up, it doesn't have to be anything huge. But, if everybody made that sort of small effort, I feel like we
Yeah,
could help Mother Nature a lot more than we have now.
for sure. For sure. And I mean, you know, you must see a very different side, well, in a way similar, but also a very different side of destruction, like towards the ocean than we see here in South Africa. And even in South Africa, there are many levels to it. There are yes, thank you, Tando. It's the Ocean Impact Essay campaign. I'm going to share that with
Okay.
you later. Sorry. So, there's exactly what you're talking about with a lot of trash coming in. Then we have the issues of like where we have communities that have always lived close to the ocean and sort of taken care of the resources and managed the resources in a sustainable way. And they, in an attempt to conserve through MPAs, have been then removed from those areas. So we've also got quite a rich and twisty history, with ocean conservation and cleanup and issues, not just ecological, but also social. And I wonder if you have any similar issues in, your part of the world.
So I actually just recently posted a sort of mini series about like the impacts of tourism. And I looked at the
Okay,
impacts of
cool.
tourism on environmental issues, on social and
Mm,
economical issues. So it was sort of one of those things. I see it a lot in Dominican Republic where, Dominicans aren't necessarily as up to date as they should be on their conservation efforts. But then it also doesn't help when you have these massive amount of tourists that are coming in to the country. Last time I was there, I went diving, a guy dropped an anchor almost on my head. Despite the fact that
okay.
there were like places to attach the boats out there,
Yeah, yeah.
he decided to just drop it right on a reef. I'm like,
Incredible.
And it's sort of things like that. I mean, obviously, there's a very big social aspect behind a lot of it. Dominican Republic is sort of one of those countries that's dependent on nature. So even though their
Mm,
conservation efforts aren't necessarily where they could be, there's a very big effort to sort of protect the ocean and protect the animals that live within the ocean because they're dependent on it. We're a very
yeah.
small nature. We're dependent on the ocean for food. We're dependent on the ocean to basically bring everything in. We're dependent on the
Mm,
ocean for tourism. We have what was it, $7.8 billion tourism industry. All of those people are
mm,
going there because of the ocean, not necessarily,
yes.
I mean, very few people are going there because they don't want to see the beach or want to experience the ocean. So
Yeah.
Dominican Republic is very dependent on it, which is why I'm always like kind of preaching, like, it's something that we need to protect. Our nation is
Mm,
dependent on the ocean. Like we can't
mm,
fail our ocean because with our ocean we are nothing.
100%. As a species, we are nothing.
We're
Um,
nothing without the ocean, right?
yeah. No, definitely. So, do you have a sort of a vision for yourself for the future or an idea of where you'd like to go with your degree? Because I hear a lot of, preaching at home or in the Dominican Republic. Is that kind of what you want to do? Like go back there and help to, bring your knowledge back, that kind of thing? Or do you want to move somewhere else? What's your dream? What's
I
your
don't
hopes?
really know where I want to go. That's the very sad part. I'm all over the place because of the fact that at this point, like I really like, so it's funny. This is very weird. I last year I was in the Arctic for 21 days on an Arctic expedition, and I had the chance
Damn.
to work with two members of the indigenous communities of the Arctic.
Oh,
And we
wow.
sort of had this crazy realization that even though they
Yeah.
are from all the way up there and I'm from all the way down here, we had so many of the similar problems,
Yeah.
about, trash pollution coming in from like industrialized places of the world. They don't
Mm.
have that much trash production up there, yet they have islands filled with trash that are coming up from the south that are being brought up by the ocean currents. Global warming is affecting them, even though they probably have one of the smallest carbon footprints you could even think of. You
Yeah.
know, their sea ice is melting. It's so much stuff. Their species are dying out that they're dependent on because they hunt these species traditionally. They're seeing less and
Yes.
less
Yeah.
of them because the sea ice is regressing. They have to go further and
Mm.
further to find animals to hunt. And it's sort of disrupting their way of life. And I see it and I was like, we have the same problem, in like all over the Caribbean, not even just like Dominican
Yes.
Republic, where sea level
Yeah.
rise is affecting us. There's pollution
Mm.
coming in from different places. Cruise ships are dumping crap into the oceans. So it's like
Less
our ocean,
resources.
our way of lives are being affected because of outside influence. So it was really
Yeah.
crazy when you actually sit there and you think about it. You would never
Mm.
think that people who are so far apart and come from such different environments have the exact same issue.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing how it speaks to like the connectedness of the ocean? How the
Yeah,
ocean connects us. I mean, this is a really tragic story that you're telling me, telling us rather. But the one thing that strikes me is like the ocean just connects, and you're saying like we have so much in common, and it's because you share the same ocean, right?
yeah,
We share the same ocean, and I think it's so cool, and it can be used in such a positive way. And it is a shame that, unfortunately, it's also being used in a negative way, not
yeah.
not necessarily consciously, but the fact that it transports unwanted things, and oh yeah, just like we share this common dying of resources, um, but it could be such a positive, beautiful thing, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Even when you think about things like culture, how many nations that are completely independent from each other, the ocean is a
yeah,
huge part of their culture. And,
exactly, yeah.
it's a beautiful yet tragic thing.
Yeah, yes. And oh, hi, Shamir. I wanted to say something because you said that you don't know what you want to do and it's sad. But to me, that's really exciting because you're kind of at the stage of your career and your life where you could go anywhere. You could like
Yeah,
switch direction completely and be like, hello, you know, or you could just continue along this really strong career path that you've begun to create. So
Yeah,
it's quite exciting.
I say it's sad, but it is one of those things where I'm like, I'm okay with sort of not knowing where
Yeah,
I'm going to be tomorrow because I don't, the truth
yeah,
is, I don't know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow and have a passion that's, like, discover something that I'm extremely passionate about that wasn't there yesterday. When
yes,
I first said I wanted to be a marine biologist, I never really thought about studying aquatic toxicology or like chemical pollutants.
yeah.
And now it's like, heck yeah, like, you guys can focus on plastic. That's fine. Don't worry. I love everyone who focuses on plastic. I want to kind of focus on the thing that nobody sees, but it's there.
Yes, yeah.
Because the truth
Uh,
is, there's no difference between, like, at least when you look at it, between a healthy body of water and a completely contaminated body of water. You really don't see it. In fact,
yeah,
here it's the opposite. If I see a body of water that looks spectacular, I'm like, that's contaminated. Because they
you're
actually
like,
use
what's going on there?
They
Yeah.
use copper to kill algae in the water, and and the algae sites have a lot of copper in it. So, like, we'll walk past these
Right.
ponds, like these lakes that are like blue and
It's not
beautiful.
natural. Yeah.
No, it's
Okay,
not.
I know what you mean.
I
Yeah.
was like, that's not supposed to look that blue.
It's not supposed to be that postcard idyllic, right?
Yeah, like there's no filter on this.
Yeah.
This doesn't look right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like how when people see a really beautiful red or orange sunset and it's like, well, actually it's, pollution. So,
No. It's like we see
yeah.
these things and we're like, oh, this is beautiful. We sort of hold it to this weird like beauty standard and we're like, well, that's not
Yeah.
natural. It's not what it's supposed to look like. Sorry.
Yeah. Taken a lot of
Sorry to
plucking and
disappoint.
pleasing to get there. Yeah. No, I
Meanwhile,
hear
nothing
you.
can grow there. That's the funny thing. You
Yeah.
see these lakes that are super nice and blue and clear, but nothing can
Mm.
grow there. There's no plants, but a body of water needs plants for oxygen.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, how do you then connect people to the environment through this very sterile sort of body of water, right? It's not a
Exactly.
real representation of the
Yeah.
ocean or the lake or whatever it is. That's really
Like, you know what?
interesting.
I'd rather see a lake with a whole bunch of like seagrass growing in it, and it might look a
Yeah,
little bit crazy, but that's what it's supposed to be.
yeah.
Bodies
Fill
of
up with
water are
slimy
meant to be a little
Cladophyra.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. No, definitely. It needs to have that smell, that algae smell, right?
Yeah, it needs to have everything. A healthy,
Yeah.
that's what we talk about. Healthy ecosystems have, fish from all trophic levels. They have plants. There's sometimes some decay. It's part of it. Things die and it's the circle of life.
Mm.
And then other things take
Mm.
that energy and grow and reproduce. Everything's supposed to
Beautiful.
be a part of it. You can't just have the pretty without the ugly. It's not
Yes,
healthy.
100%. You can't have the whales without the plankton and the
Exactly.
poop. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's funny because a friend of mine is like super into zooplankton, and we used to like joke around because she's like, I don't care about the whales, and we're like, we don't care about the zooplankton, but you need one to have the other.
I- Absolutely.
Without
Yeah.
the zooplankton, there are no whales.
That's true. Um, and have you been diving? So you've been diving in Florida for work mostly, right? And in the
No,
Dominican
for fun.
Republic for
Mostly
fun,
for
not
fun.
for work. Oh, cool.
No, sometimes
Okay.
I'll do work, but it's mostly fun.
Actually, I get that question a lot. Oh, you dive. Is it mostly for work? And I'm always like, I've never dived for work. I dived once for work, but yeah,
Yeah.
other than,
Like I do a lot
yeah.
of citizen science type dives, but I don't think that's work.
Okay.
Like to me, that's a fun
That's
dive.
a hobby. That's a hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I'm not
understand.
getting paid to be there.
And have you dived anywhere else that's really cool?
No, mostly, Caribbean type.
That's really
I did
cool.
one dive once, like years ago in Germany, which was my only cold water dive. And
Ooh.
I'm super bummed.
Okay.
I'm super bummed because yeah, I travel to Canada a lot. So I was like, but they closed their border this year to us.
Oh, yes,
So I was
of
like,
course.
oh, crap, because I really wanted to go diving up there because I kind of want to experience a cold water dive. Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to see.
You need to come visit us in Cape Town.
I've been saying I need to make it down there. It sounds so
You do.
amazing. I see everybody's
It's
pictures. I'm
magic.
like,
It's It's just like there's no other word. It's magic. And it's cold water. Yeah, perfect.
I think magic is a fair word to describe the ocean. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's funny whenever I have
Yeah.
like workshops and kids are like, well, how does this work with magic? Just leave
Yeah.
it.
Hashtag science communication. Yeah.
Exactly. It's magic.
Magic.
Just
How does it
don't
work?
even
It's
bother
magic.
asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Where else would you, okay, aside from Canada and Cape Town, where else would you, like, what's on your diving bucket list? Do you even have one? Is it too
No,
broad to share? No.
it's too broad because as soon as I
Yeah.
hear something, I'm like, I want to do that. Someone's like,
Yep.
I
Yep.
want
Yep.
ice
Yep.
diving. I'm like, I want to do that. I'm going to freeze my ass off. I want to do it.
Ooh. Yeah. I think ice diving might be the only thing I'd be too
I definitely
to
feel like I
try.
would need a lot of hand holding because I'm like, I'm not about to
Yeah.
get lost under this ice. You better put like
Yes.
a tracker on
Yeah.
me, like
Yes.
a beacon.
Because that is my fear actually, is the being trapped part. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that would
yeah,
be
but it's
very
one of
good.
those things where I feel like I would try it out. It's sort of just like I can't have a bucket list because
Yeah.
I'm just like take me everywhere.
It's ever
Yeah,
evolving. Yeah. That's
yeah.
very cool. That's super cool. And do you um do you manage to get back to the Dominican Republic often? Because you very casually were like, oh no, not really, just the Caribbean. And I like, to me that's like, wow, a dream destination. I'd love to visit. I'd love to eat, to dive, to swim, to smell everything. But yeah, it sounds like
I,
it's
no, I do. I go back home as often as I can. I was actually supposed to go 2 weeks from now, but I couldn't because I just became a U.S. citizen, and their
congratulations.
passport. Yeah, I could have waited like a month because they took my green card and now I don't have a
Oh
passport,
no.
so I can't travel.
I'm
I'm like,
sorry to
okay,
hear that.
I guess I'll wait. But no, I do try to go back home often. I think for me it's important at least to sort of stay connected with my roots. I know a lot of people, a lot of
Mm,
Hispanics especially or Latinos, come to the US and they sort of stay here and never go back home. And it's sort of a
mm.
really important thing for me because it's where I came from. It's inspired me, it created me,
Yes.
and I kind of never want to lose that sort of culture and that connection to my culture. So I try to go back home as often.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I relate to that in some way. It's like once I moved from home, then I started to appreciate my own culture more. And now I want to
Right?
regularly go back and learn things. Yeah. But on that topic, what has your experience been like as a Black woman in the field, in the diving community? Yeah.
It's
So,
lacking. I say this a lot, for anybody who follows me. I say it a lot. The community is definitely lacking. It's lacking in diversity on every sort of possible, iteration. We say that there's a lot of women or that marine science is the most diverse
yes,
field. I'm like, okay,
yes,
well, where? Can you point me to where it's very diverse? Because I don't see it.
yeah,
We see a lot of women in it, but we don't see a lot of women in higher positions, which, still a lack of a diversity. We see them all at sort
yes,
of the bottom of the barrel, but we rarely see any of them as directors, as assistant directors, as any higher position. And that's a little bit worrisome. So a friend and
good
I
point.
actually started a chapter of the Society for Women in Marine Science here at our university. And, we had this whole grand idea, and we're like, we want, a woman in marine science, obviously, to be like our advisor, our faculty advisor. So we did our research, and we have 35 faculty members. Out of the 35 faculty members, 3 of them were women, and none of them were of color.
Oh,
So,
wow.
like, and
Wow, wow,
to
wow.
me, it was mind blowing because we're in Miami. You would think, Miami is
Yes,
extremely diverse in terms of its population.
yeah,
We have
that's
a lot
what
of,
I saw.
Black people, we have a lot of Latinos, we have a lot of people of color, we have some indigenous people sprinkled, well, not some, we actually have a lot of indigenous people here,
Mm,
especially around the Everglades. And then you don't see any of that representation in science, even though the population is that diverse. You're kind of just like, why is that?
ah, that makes me so
Like,
uncomfortable.
Like
I
something's
don't,
not right. I'm used to being the only person of color in a room, and it's
yeah.
sort of a little bit daunting sometimes because there's this
Mm-hmm.
immense pressure to sort of represent an entire race or an entire gender
Yes,
or an entire
yes, yes,
ethnicity.
yes.
So you're kind
Yeah.
of like always trying to be on your best behavior because you're like, I don't want to upset anyone because then someone's going to see that and be like, well, you know, all Black people are like this or all Hispanics are like that. And it was like, that's not the case. You know, I'm an idiot,
Mm.
but I'm just an idiot. Don't put this on everybody else. So there's a lot of pressure, I think, to sort of try to seem, you know, like as the perfect, you know, scientist for me.
Mm.
And then you sort of end up in these situations where you have a lot of tokenism because then it's like, well,
Yeah.
you know, this is our token minority.
Look at
Like,
Rose. We are diverse. We do have women. Look at her. She
yeah,
exists.
they're like, look at how diverse we are. And it's like, I'm just one
Yeah.
person in an
Yeah.
entire department of like
Yeah.
400 people. Like, what are you talking
And
about?
and then it almost becomes your job to speak for absolutely all people of color. Like even if they're not, if you're not the same race. Like I don't know if you've experienced that, but that happens a lot here.
Oh yeah, I get it a lot from one version, like from one way or the other, you know, because I am Hispanic and I am Black, so it's kind of like you always kind of have to talk from one to the other. And then something that's really funny that I always get where they're like, "Oh, we didn't realize you were Hispanic," and I was like, "Really? My last name's Santana. You think that was an
Yes.
accident?"
Yeah. Because as you say that, I'm like, oh, but her last name, okay. Um, do you identify more with one or the other? And I know that's a bit of a personal question, so feel free to not answer it if you're not.
Not really. I mean, you know, because I'm Black doesn't make me any less Hispanic, and because I'm Hispanic doesn't make me any less Black, you know?
Hmm.
Like, one's an
Yeah.
ethnicity, one's a race, you know? And a lot of people are always confused by this. You know, someone asked me, like, recently, well, do you identify as Hispanic? And I was like, why wouldn't I? My mother's Hispanic. I was born in Dominican Republic, you know? I always go,
Yeah.
why wouldn't I be Hispanic just because I'm Black? I can't be both, you know?
Yeah.
I can very much
Yeah.
so
I
yell
think
at you in Spanish, make no mistake.
sounds scary, but
I think
cool.
it's kind of a thing, especially in STEM, where you kind of, I feel like sometimes have to pick and choose your battles.
Right. Right. Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, you know, I feel like for a lot of us, there's a lot of imposter syndrome because of this specifically, especially then when you start looking at things like, well, you know, you only won this fellowship because you're a minority, or
Oh,
you only won this
don't get
award
me
because you're a
started.
minority. So I feel like it's awful because it drives the imposter syndrome. And a lot of women I know where you're kind of
Yeah.
like women, you know, or people of color, you know, any minority really, where you have to sit there and wonder, like, did I accomplish this because I'm good enough, or did I accomplish this because this organization needed to fill a quota and I was their best option?
I
You know?
feel that on a soul level. Yeah, I do. And you need like a lot of pep talks to sometimes just get through a day, you know?
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
what
yes.
should be an ordinary day. And then it makes you
Recently,
doubt yourself again. It's like this vicious positive feedback loop,
yeah,
you know?
it's awful. Just
Yeah.
recently, well, not recently now. I had lost all sense of time this year. So forgive me. I think it was like towards the
Yeah.
beginning of the year before everything shut down. There was this really big panel where there was like a lot of important people from our university sitting at this panel, and you know, from our environmental protection agency, you know, we had a representative there, and they were sort of talking about the health of our bodies of water. And I was sitting there
Mm.
at the time, I hadn't graduated yet, so I was still an undergraduate student. You know, I was one of three women at the table, you know, of like 20 people. I was the only, you know, Black person. I was the only Hispanic person.
Mm.
And I was sort of sitting there and I was like, why am I sitting here among all these people? You know, I was like,
Yeah.
what am I doing here? You know, these are all
Yeah.
directors and associate professors, and I'm kind of just there, like, you know, like my little self, like, why am I here? And the funny thing is, once I started talking, you know, about the importance of my research, you know, it sort of came back to me, and I was like, you know what? I am an expert in my field. I know what I'm talking about. I deserve to be here as
Yeah.
much as the next person. The only difference
Absolutely.
between them and me is the amount of years they've been doing it. But what we're saying is the exact
Yeah.
same thing. They're talking about their current research. I'm talking about my research that I've spent 3 years on. It's
Yes.
just as relevant and as important, you know. So it's really important, I feel like, for a lot of minorities and stuff, just to be able to sort of take that step back and be like, I deserve to be at this table as much as the next person. And if you won't give me a seat, I'll bring my own chair.
Yeah. And you know, that is some of the advice or one of the pieces of advice that I hand out the most to students, especially students of color, especially female students of color, is to never because you go to conferences or seminars and it's daunting. You're sitting in a room full of like faces of people that you've cited and that you've heard of, whispered in rooms. Is to always remember that you are the authority on your research, right? No matter how young you are, even if it's an honors level thing, you have spent a year studying. There may be experts in the room, but they have not studied those particular species in that particular location using those particular methods in that particular year, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have
that is so
worked,
true.
yeah, and then you go higher up at a postgrad level. It's your research. You need to own it. You need to
Yeah.
answer the questions, put up the fight if you have to, take in the accomplishment and the praise. And so often we feel like we don't deserve that praise. And that's the biggest thing for me, is that you
Yes.
deserve it. That's the biggest
Yes.
message.
Yes, that definitely happens a lot. I mean, I use a lot of like self-deprecating humor, so people I know
Yes,
people
yeah.
think I'm like genuinely like depressed. And I'm like,
Oh
no, like
no.
I poke fun of myself, but it sort of turned into a thing where I'm like, look, you can't tell me more about my research than I can. Like, it's not going to happen. And funnily
Yeah,
enough, there was one professor, and his whole thing was like, metal contaminants. And I was like he's about to
yeah,
tear me a new one because this is like his
yeah,
field. And
yeah.
after the presentation, he's like, you looked at something that I never really considered. Because in my studies, I
Wow.
found that there was a difference that male and females were being affected differently. So he's like,
Okay.
I've been studying this for 20 years and I never
Didn't
realized
consider
that.
the gender thing. Yeah.
He's like, I never
Amazing.
considered it a thing. I was just
Wow. Thank you. I know.
no, but it's sort of those little
Fantastic.
moments of like confidence boosters that you really need because
Mm.
it can be very daunting when you walk into a room and nobody looks like you.
Yes.
It
Oh,
sort
yes.
of it throws you back a little bit, I think. Just recently
Yeah.
we were at a conference in San Diego and it was like so white. And I don't mean this in a mean way or in a bad way. It's just
Yeah.
very daunting. You don't see anyone that looks like you. Growing up, I heard it a lot where people are like, you want to study marine science? Isn't that like for white people? And I'm like, no, it's for
Not for
anyone
you.
who loves
Yeah.
the ocean. I was like, it's for
Yes.
anybody who loves the ocean. It's for anyone who wants to be a scientist. There's no like denomination of like what a
Yes.
scientist should
Yeah.
look like or what a marine
Yeah.
scientist should look like. Considering the
Exactly.
fact that I feel like people who live on coast or islands are some of the most diverse people I've ever seen. Like
Yeah.
you go to
Yeah. Yeah.
one
Yeah.
island nation and they're black. You go to one island nation, they're white. Some of them are natives or like they're indigenous.
Yeah.
There's Asians. There's every variation of everything you could possibly think of. So how are you going to
Yeah.
tell me that the field that revolves around the ocean is only meant for a
For
certain
white
group of
people.
people
Yeah.
when the ocean belongs to everybody?
Yeah. I
Dang.
mean, certainly I see a change. I see it with people like you, with, all the wonderful people out there, the young scientists. There is definitely a shift, and I really look forward to this sort of taking off. And find, I'm always so pleased to find, and as I've gone on, I found that every year brings new and more allies, and new and more people that are willing to say, hold up, I never considered that. Tell me more,
Yeah.
or maybe I have been doing that wrong, or I haven't been sensitive to that. And that for me is such a positive thing, even
Yeah.
in a field that lacks diversity, that we are slowly moving in that direction, right? Do you feel that
We
way,
are.
or do you see that?
No, I do. And it's one of those things where it's in the moment you kind of don't think about it, but then like when you go home and
Mm,
actually stop to think about it. So
reflect.
I do a lot of
Yeah.
workshops with children, for example. And I'll
Okay,
bring
cool.
them to my lab and I'll show them the fish and I'll show them some of the research and I set up like little stations for
That's
them
so
to do like their
cool.
own little experiments.
Oh,
And
wow.
it got canceled this year because of COVID, but last year when we did it, there was, I don't know, 20 kids and, it was such a diverse group of children. We had our Latinos, we had our Blacks, we had Asian people, we even
Yeah.
had like an indigenous person within this group. And it sort of turned into a thing where some of them were like, I don't want to be an astronaut anymore. I want to study the ocean. And I'm like, we're
Yay.
teaching them. We're getting more and more of them. This is good. It's
That's
one of those things where I feel like a big thing up until this point has just been lack of exposure. because we're putting more and more emphasis on education and outreach, we're attracting more people into the field now.
Yes, 100%. No, that's great to hear. Has there been, okay, we are almost at the end of our Instagram's going to kick us off soon, but I have two more questions for you. And the one is, who would you say has been your biggest supporter, your biggest inspiration, I do not like the word role model. I don't believe we should idolize people. But, people shape who we are. There are many people that shape who we are and that have helped us get here. So for you, who would you say has been the biggest person or people in, getting to you to where you are?
My mom, as cheesy as it sounds, she's always been the type of
Not
person who's
cheesy.
like, she's like, listen, if this is what you want to do, go for it, Where people would tell her, your daughter's going to be homeless, right? Because, like, it doesn't pay very well. And she's like, she'll always have a place here. If this is what she wants to do, she can go do it. And she's sort of the one that's always been like, if this is what you're passionate about, stick with it. It doesn't matter what everybody else says, You want to go diving, go do it, You want to be a marine scientist, go do that. So, Like, I've never looked up to anybody in the field, which is really weird. I've seen people and I'm like, I admire what you've done, but I don't look up to you. But
Same, yeah. So I really love that, actually. That's such a beautiful answer. And considering like your whole story of where you came from and how your parents met, I think it's like beautiful, almost like full circle. Like she's she's like your link to the ocean, and your ocean is your link to her, and everything. Oh, I don't know, it's just too much. And the last question I wanted to ask you, or the last thing that I'd like from you is, because for me it's important, and in recent years it's become very important to involve kids in marine science, and from what you're telling me, it's the same for you. So what advice would you give to kids or even teenagers wanting to go down a similar path?
Reach out to people, at aquariums, reach out to people at universities, find out if you can shadow them for a day, or if you can just like come take like a behind the scenes look of how things work. A lot of people, I mean, we have our little crabs here in our field, but a lot of people they want to help. I've had, high school students reach out to me asking me, can you give us a tour of our lab and talk about research? I'm like, I hosted one of them, for like 3 days here at the lab so they could sort of see what it's like, the day-to-day, and it's sort of just like reach out to people, even if it's not like at a science-related place, even if it's, like a dive shop or somebody who's going, out on the water, reach out to them. A lot of the times people who spend all their time out on the water, even though they're not scientists, they know so much about the ocean. And I say this because some people are assholes and they're like, well, you have to have a PhD to be a scientist. I know so many people who are divers who are fishermen who know so much about the ocean and the importance of it. Like, reach out to them, talk to them. The worst they can say is no. And at that point, you reach out to someone else.
Someone's bound to say yes. And as the field grows, we're realizing more and more how much it's important for us to get kids involved. So we're less likely to say no. I agree with you. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah, it doesn't all have to be through a school, just go out.
Yes, yes, definitely. We got quite a few comments as well, and I'm sorry if I've ignored those. This has been a very riveting chat for me. So I'm going to just go back and see if we missed anything. The Ocean of Color says Dominican Republic is a dream destination. Shark Jenny.
It is. If you come, I'll be your tour guide.
I'm jumping in on that trip, so yes, count me in as well, please. Captain Looney says, need to get more environmental education on those party boats. Oh, yeah.
We totally should.
And Captain Looney is offering a lovely little sailboat in West Palm. And a few other, if you see Mariah, is it Mariah sailing catamaran down there? That was one of our North Palm boats. Oh, okay. Sounds like you guys are connected. Sharkbait loves magic. The Ocean of Color is screaming. For some reason, I don't remember at what point that was. um, a lot of, oh, Amalia loves this conversation. Tando likes the idea of celebrating our hustle. Yes. Captain Looney says, blow those doubters away. Lack of exposure is definitely a big thing. Yes, and something we are working to change. And Captain
Yeah.
Looney says, very good chat today. So,
Thank
with
you.
that, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we say our goodbyes?
No, I mean, if anybody has any questions or wants to chat about something else or wants to come hear me rant about random problems and stuff, you can just follow me or just message me.
Yeah,
I'm always happy to talk to people.
Saiko a follow. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure getting to chat to you and to know you and to hear about your really cool origin story, which for me is the coolest thing so far. I can't wait to, yeah, I can't wait to read about your research and to just see where you go and what you do. It's very exciting, and I love that we have so many similar ideas and complementary ideas, and I look forward to future chats.
Me too. That's the great thing, right? We're all connected
Yeah.
somehow.
Yes.
Not
definitely.
somehow. We're all connected by the ocean.
Oh yeah, easily. Awesome. Okay. Have a good
Thank
afternoon.
you.
I think it's afternoon for you. I'm going to
Yeah.
finish my dinner, and yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for joining in, everyone.